The rain had been hammering down for what felt like hours by the time I reached the end of that narrow dirt road. I didn't even remember when it started anymore. All I knew was that I'd been walking for nearly 40 minutes along the western edge of Lansdowne, head down, my reflective safety jacket plastered to my back like a second skin. My work boots were caked in mud and sewer water from the last job site, and my phone was down to 7% battery. The screen glowed weakly in my palm as I checked the map one more time. This stretch still showed up as city limits on the app, but out here it felt like the edge of everything. Houses thinning out, streetlights growing scarce, the distant hum of traffic fading until all that was left was the slap of rain on wet asphalt and the squelch of my steps. At the very end of the road sat the farm. It wasn't some picture-perfect countryside spread. It looked more like a piece of land someone had stubbornly refused to sell off when the city crept closer. A two-story white wooden house with a steep roof and a wide front porch, warm yellow light spilling through rain-streaked windows. Behind it, I could just make out the old red barn, a couple of sheds covered in tarps, and a small field that had gone back to tall grass and weathered fence posts. The whole place sat there like it had been forgotten between the warehouses and the new subdivisions. I stood outside the wooden gate for almost a full minute, rain running off the brim of my cap before I forced myself to walk up. I hated asking for anything, had sworn off it since I was 19 and decided I'd handle my own messes. But tonight the cold had already sunk into my bones, and I knew if I kept walking, I'd wake up tomorrow either on a bus bench with a fever or worse. So I climbed the porch steps and knocked 3 times. Nothing at first, just the rain drumming on the roof and the wind sweeping across the dark field. I was already turning away when the hallway light inside clicked on brighter. The lock turned. The door opened. The woman standing there wasn't old like I'd pictured. I'd expected maybe a hard-faced older lady with a shotgun, or at least a suspicious glare. Instead, she looked somewhere in her late 30s, maybe brushing 40, brown hair pulled back low and simple, wearing a loose gray sweater and dark jeans, thick socks on her feet. No makeup, just a thin silver ring on her index finger. But those gray-green eyes held a kind of calm exhaustion that told me right away she wasn't the type to open her door easily to strangers. She looked me up and down slowly. Reflective orange jacket streaked with dirt, muddy pants, face probably smudged from the job site, wet hair stuck to my forehead. I knew I looked like I'd crawled out of a drainage ditch. "You looking for someone?" Her voice was low, a little rough, and completely unsentimental. "Sorry to bother you," I said, trying to stand a little straighter. "Name's Ethan Brooks. The last bus stopped running because of the flooding, my phone's almost dead, and my place—" I hated the next part. "My landlord locked me out tonight. I just wanted to ask if I could crash on your porch or maybe in the barn for the night. I'll be gone first thing in the morning." She didn't blink, just kept studying me like she was weighing more than the wet clothes. "I'm not asking for money," I added quickly. "I just need somewhere dry for a few hours." A long silence stretched between us. The rain picked up, lashing sideways under the porch roof. I saw her shoulders tighten a fraction against the cold draft. "The barn out back isn't locked," she said at last, "but the concrete floor is cold." I nodded fast. "That's more than enough, thank you." I'd already turned halfway when she spoke again. "You running a fever?" I stopped. "What? You're shaking like it's more than just the rain." She looked at me steadily. "You got a fever?" "I'm fine." "That's not an answer." I gave a short, tired laugh. "I don't know yet." For the first time, her eyes softened. Just a fraction, but enough that I noticed. "Come inside first. I can just use the barn. Inside before you pass out on my porch." Something in the way she said it made me listen. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was the voice of someone who'd seen too many people pretending they were okay when they clearly weren't. I stepped across the threshold. The warmth hit me like a wall. My skin prickled as the heat rushed in. The house smelled of wood polish, plain soap, and something herbal, maybe dried lavender. It wasn't fancy, but everything was clean and orderly in that quiet way that comes from years of living alone. Coats hung straight on hooks, shoes lined up neatly by the door. A single lamp cast a soft glow over an open book on the coffee table and a half-drunk mug on the kitchen counter. She handed me an old towel without a word. "Dry your hair first. I just oiled the hardwood last week." I did as she said, rubbing the towel over my head while water dripped onto the mat. "What's your name?" I asked, feeling like a kid who'd wandered into the wrong house. She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms folded. "Lauren Hargrove." The name sounded solid and quiet at the same time, exactly like her. The first thought that crossed my mind was simple. This woman didn't look like the kind who let strangers stay the night. The second thought came right after, quieter and heavier. Because of that, I was probably going to remember tonight for a long time. I had no idea then that by morning everything would already be different. Lauren didn't let me sleep in the barn after all. She decided that with the same firm voice that told me arguing would be useless. You can sit down at the kitchen table or keep shaking there for another 10 minutes and then fall over. One or the other. I sat. She set a bowl of hot soup in front of me, 2 slices of toasted bread, and a mug of amber tea that smelled like ginger and honey. I couldn't remember the last time someone put a meal in front of me without expecting money for it. Maybe back when my mom was still in Worcester and I hadn't yet turned into the guy who lived on canned food after night shifts. I was hungry enough to dig in right away, but the unexpected kindness made me more embarrassed than hungry. "Thanks," I said. Lauren only nodded and sat across from me with her own mug of tea. She didn't ask nosy questions or stare at me like some stray animal she'd dragged in from the rain. She just watched enough to make sure I wasn't about to keel over onto the table. I'd finished half the bowl when she finally spoke. What exactly does locked out mean? I could have lied and made it simple, but I was too tired, so the truth came out. It's a monthly rental room in one of those old buildings near the rail yard. Landlord jacked the rent up another $200. I didn't have it yet. When I got back from my shift tonight, my stuff was already out in the hallway. I crammed what I could into the backpack. Lauren glanced at the soaked bag under the chair. And the rest? The important things are in my locker at work. Clothes. I gave a tired laugh. Probably making friends with the third-floor hallway by now. She didn't answer right away. She just looked down at her hands wrapped around the mug. I noticed then that her knuckles were a little red, like she'd been working outside with tools or a shovel before I showed up. "I'll pay you if you let me stay a night or two," I added. "I don't want to take advantage." "You always assume people are going to think you're taking advantage?" she asked without looking up. The question stopped me cold for a second. "Usually," I admitted. Lauren nodded like the answer didn't surprise her at all. "You clean industrial sites for the city. Pick up odd jobs on the side. Just lost your place. Cold rain. Most people looking at you probably wouldn't be all that kind." She met my eyes. "You learn to apologize before anyone even accuses you." I let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Sounds like you know the feeling." The corner of her mouth twitched, just barely, not quite a smile, just something too quick for me to catch. "I know what it feels like to have to prove you're not a burden," she said. That was the first thing she said that made me realize Lauren Hargrove wasn't just some woman being nice on a rainy night. There was a story inside her too. I didn't push, partly out of politeness, partly because I'd learned in enough late-night bars that when someone cracks open a piece of pain, you don't immediately start digging, or they'll slam every door shut again. When I finished eating, I stood up and started washing the dishes like it was automatic. Lauren leaned against the counter and watched me, weighing whether to stop me, then let it go. "There's a guest room," she said behind me. "Upstairs, end of the hall on the right." I turned. "You don't have to." "You've got a real fever." She cut me off. "I'm not planning on calling an ambulance tomorrow morning because some stubborn guy passed out in an old horse stall." "You always this blunt when you're being nice?" This time she actually smiled. Just a little, but it changed her whole face. "Only with people who insist on collapsing right in front of my door." I followed her upstairs. The house was so quiet at night that every creak of the wooden steps sounded like a private conversation. She showed me the small guest room. Simple wooden bed, low dresser, a lamp, folded blankets, and a window looking out over the dark field behind the house. Bathrooms across the hall, clean towels in the cabinet under the sink. Lauren stood in the doorway. "If the fever gets worse, call me." I looked at her and didn't understand why a normal sentence like that made my chest tighten. "Lauren." "What?" "I know you don't owe me any of this." I gripped the towel tighter. Thank you, I mean it." She didn't answer right away. The hallway light caught half her face, the other half in shadow. "Get some sleep, Ethan," she said softly. "You look like if I stand here another 5 minutes, you're going to drop right on the floor." I nearly did. That night I slept deeper than I had in months. I only half woke once around midnight, hearing the wind sweep across the fence line outside, the clean scent of soap on the pillow, and the strange, safe feeling of being in a house that wasn't mine but felt more like home than anywhere I'd slept in the last several months. The next morning I woke to the smell of coffee and the faint clink of something outside. I came downstairs still half groggy, the fever finally easing, wearing the old t-shirt she'd given me the night before and the same damp-cuffed work pants. Lauren was out on the back porch, her back to me, a denim jacket thrown over an olive green sweater dress. She was scooping feed into the trough for two small goats in the pen beside the house, animals I hadn't even noticed in the dark the night before. The sight was so ordinary and so out of place at the same time that I just stood there and watched for a minute. The woman who had opened her door to me in the pouring rain, who spoke in short sentences and kept her eyes guarded, was now tying her hair up quickly and feeding goats under the gray morning light like it was the most normal thing in the world. Some people carry a sense of home in the way they move, even when they aren't smiling. Lauren was one of them. Maybe that was why the question slipped out of me before I could stop it. I leaned against the kitchen door frame and asked, "Have you been living here alone for a long time?" It wasn't a big question. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't digging for pain. But it cracked the wall between us faster than I ever expected. Lauren turned and looked at me. Her gray-green eyes caught the cold early light, and in that single moment I saw she wasn't the calm woman from the night before anymore. She was suddenly someone who didn't know where to hide her loneliness. Lauren stepped back into the kitchen from the porch, placing the small shovel in the sink and wiping her hands on the dish towel hanging by the counter. "Why did you ask that?" she said. Her voice stayed steady, but I caught the way her shoulders tensed just a fraction, like someone standing too close to a door they'd kept locked for years. I pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down, trying to keep my answer as light as I could. "Because this house looks like it's been lived in for a long time," I said, glancing around at the polished wood floors and the neat rows of mugs on the open shelf. "But at the same time, it feels like nobody's really touched the person who lives here." She could have laughed it off, changed the subject, told me I was asking too many questions for a guy who'd only been here one night. Instead, Lauren poured a fresh cup of coffee and set it in front of me before sitting down across the table. The morning light coming through the window made the faint shadows under her eyes and the tiny lines at the corners of her mouth more visible, things the warm lamp last night had hidden. 7 years, she said. I waited. "I've been living here alone for 7 years. This farm belonged to my ex-husband's family." The words dropped between us like a small stone into still water. I didn't interrupt. Lauren wrapped both hands around her own mug and kept going, her tone flat like she was reading from a report she'd memorized long ago. "We used to live downtown. Glass apartment, doorman, weekend fundraisers, the whole successful life package. Then I found out he was sleeping with a woman from the development firm. She was 9 years younger than me, always laughing loud, and she wanted kids." Lauren's mouth twitched. "He left me this place as part of the settlement. His parents had put it in both sons' names, but his brother didn't want it. My ex called it not fitting his new lifestyle. So I took the farm and enough money to fix the barn and keep the land. And I disappeared from the dinner parties where I used to smile on cue. I kept my eyes on the coffee. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said quickly. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy." "I know." "Do you?" I thought about it for a second and nodded. "You're telling me because I just asked how long you've been here alone." For the first time, she leaned back in her chair like the answer had taken a little weight off her shoulders. "Most men wouldn't ask that question," she said. "I don't know if that's a compliment or a warning." "Maybe both." She took a sip. "Most of them ask what I'm doing with a farm this size, why I don't sell it, or if I get lonely out here. Very few ask how long I've actually been alone. Like the time doesn't count unless someone else notices it." I looked at her across the table for a long moment, then the words slipped out before I could stop them. "Maybe because asking that means you have to admit the person really has been alone." Right after I said it, I realized I'd gone too far. But Lauren didn't get angry. She just looked at me with a kind of tired honesty that made the kitchen feel smaller and warmer at the same time. "Yeah," she said softly. "Maybe that's it." The air between us shifted then. It wasn't sudden romance or anything dramatic. It was quieter than that. We stopped pretending I was just the guy who got locked out and she was just the woman who opened the door. We were two people sitting with hot coffee and cold morning light and lives that had already carried enough weight not to need any more pretending. I asked if she wanted me to leave that day. She set her mug down and thought about it for a few seconds. "Your fever hasn't broken yet. You can stay another day." "You're hiring me with coffee and a bed now?" "No, I'm trying to keep from watching a stubborn man collapse on my dirt road." She stood up. "But if it makes you feel better, you can earn it. The east fence on the goat pen is falling apart. If you're strong enough later, take a look at it." I smiled. "That sounds more like the world I know. Fair again?" I don't know when her blunt way of talking stopped feeling sharp and started feeling easy. I stayed that day. Then the next. Then it turned into a strange, temporary rhythm I hadn't planned on. During the day, I drove into the city for my industrial cleaning shifts or whatever odd jobs came up. In the evenings, I came back to the farm and fixed the sagging fence, replaced the loose hinges on the barn door, braced the side gate so it wouldn't drag, and even cleared the clogged drain behind the porch because the leaves had turned it into a small swamp. At first, Lauren tried to pay me for the work. I took the money the first 2 days, then refused after that. You gave me a roof, food, and decent coffee. I'm not charging you for every screw I turn. I don't like owing people. Then I guess I don't like it either. She looked at me a long time when I said that. She didn't argue, but that night she put an extra large portion of roasted chicken on my plate and pretended she hadn't noticed. The more days I spent there, the more I started seeing the small things that made her who she was. She hated the noise of the television and kept the radio on low in the kitchen instead. She dressed simple, but everything was always clean and fitted right, like she'd spent too many years where a single wrinkle could be judged. She refused to let anyone do work she could handle herself, even if it meant carrying heavy feed bags or climbing a ladder to wipe down the porch light. She slept little, and there were afternoons when she stood for long minutes out in the back field, staring toward the distant city skyline like she was still trying to figure out what she'd really left behind. I didn't ask a lot of questions, but the closer I got, the clearer it became. Lauren hadn't just run from a bad marriage. She'd run from the feeling of always having to play a part. And what scared me most was that I was starting to want to be the one place where she didn't have to play anything at all. The past never knocks on the front door like it does in movies. It shows up in quieter, smaller ways. A strange car idling too long at the gate, a name lighting up a phone screen that makes someone's shoulders go rigid, or an envelope from a law firm placed neatly on the kitchen table, the kind that knows exactly how long the silence in the house will last once it's opened. For Lauren, it came as all three. I noticed the black sedan first on a Wednesday afternoon. I was replacing the hinges on the barn door when it rolled up and stopped just outside the wooden gate. It sat there for almost 10 minutes, engine running, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. It didn't pull in. It just waited. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over to where Lauren was carrying a bucket of water toward the goat pen. Should I be worried about that? I asked, nodding toward the car. She glanced at it for half a second, then kept walking like it was nothing. Probably just someone who took the wrong turn. But that night, her phone rang close to 10. I was washing up in the kitchen when I heard her step out onto the back porch and answer in a voice that was short and flat. I already told you not to come here. No, I haven't changed my mind. You don't get to tell me what to do anymore, Marcus. The name hung in the air after she hung up. When she came back inside, I only asked, "Ex-husband?" Lauren stood very still for a moment, then nodded once. What does he want? He wants to sell off the north section of the land. It's your land. Legally, it's more complicated than that. She poured herself a glass of water. The farm is in my name, but part of the acreage along the main road is still tied up in the old family trust from his parents. His brother never signed the full transfer. I frowned. And suddenly your ex cares? She gave a thin smile. Not the farm itself. There's a new city project coming, road expansion, and a logistics hub. The land value is about to jump. She didn't say much more that night, but the next morning I came downstairs and found a cream-colored envelope centered on the kitchen table. The law firm's logo was printed in the corner. Lauren sat across from it with a mug of coffee that had gone cold, staring at the paper like she could make it disappear if she looked long enough. Bad? I asked. He's filing to reopen the property appraisal. She looked up. And he wants to negotiate in person. I guessed negotiate in rich guy language meant pressure. Usually, she said. I stepped closer. What are you going to do? Lauren gripped the edge of the envelope. What I always do, hire a lawyer, stay calm. Don't let him see me flinch. And how do you actually feel? For the first time in days, the calm mask slipped completely. I'm tired, she said. So quietly it sounded like it surprised even her. I'm tired of having to be strong every time someone else decides I'm about to break. I looked at her for a long time, and I knew if I just said, everything will be okay, it would feel like slapping a Band-Aid on a crack that ran all the way through the wall. So I told her the truth. You don't have to do that part alone. Lauren laughed, but it was tired and sad. Men usually say that right before they realize how big the mess actually is. I clean sewers and fix pipes for the city, I said, pulling out the chair across from her. I deal with big, ugly problems every single day. This time she really laughed, even though her eyes were red. The meeting with Marcus happened 2 days later. I hadn't planned on being there, but Lauren said one sentence that changed my mind. If you're here, at least I won't spend the whole time wondering if I'm about to get kicked out of my own house again. So I stayed. Marcus Hargrove arrived in a silver SUV that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. Shiny dress shoes, cashmere coat, and the kind of smile that thinks lowering your voice makes you sound kinder. He was about 5 years older than Lauren, handsome in a cold, polished way, the sort of man who had never had to scrub a toilet or patch drywall in his life. He saw me first. "So you've got company now," he said, like he was commenting on new furniture. Lauren straightened. "You're here to talk about the land or to put on a show, Marcus?" He looked at her, then back at me. "I didn't know you'd sunk this low." I felt my hands tighten at my sides. Lauren didn't flinch. "You still measure everything by how it reflects on you, don't you, Adrian? At least I know what a piece of land is worth when the market moves. And I know what it's worth not to live with someone who thinks everything has a price tag." The words cut him for half a second. He turned to me with that thin smile. Does the kid here even know what he's stepping into? Or does he think he's rescuing some poor abandoned farm wife? I looked him straight in the eye. "I think you should talk to the lawyers instead of trying to sound clever." Marcus's mouth twitched, but he clearly hadn't expected me to answer. The meeting didn't go anywhere except Lauren confirming she wasn't selling and that the lawyers would handle the rest. But what it left behind was bigger. After Marcus drove away, Lauren stood on the front porch for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just stood there like she'd used up every reserve of energy she had to keep her back straight. I walked up beside her. "You okay?" She didn't look at me. He still has this way of making me feel like I have to explain why I want anything for myself. "You don't have to explain anything." "I know." She gave a small, bitter smile. "But knowing it in your head and stopping it from hurting in your chest are two different things." A long silence passed. Then she turned to me, eyes so exhausted it actually hurt to see. "Ethan, you should go." I froze. "What? You only planned to stay one night. Things are different now." She wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "I don't want to drag you into this. I don't want you to look back one day and feel like you got trapped in my life while it was falling apart." That was the moment I got angry for the first time. Not loud. Just a cold, clear anger that comes when you finally understand exactly what's happening. "I'm not trapped," I said. Lauren stayed quiet. "I'm here. Because you're kind." "No." I stepped closer. "I'm here because I choose to be." She looked at me like those words were more dangerous than anything Marcus had said. "I don't know what to do when you talk like that," she whispered. "Then let me be clearer." I swallowed hard, no way left to back down. "I'm not staying here just because you gave me a roof. I'm staying because I can't watch you stand in this kitchen carrying everything by yourself like no one's allowed to step inside, and then walk away like it doesn't matter." Lauren's eyes filled. The tears fell quietly, but it was enough to make me stop pretending this was still just pity or convenience. I had been on her side for a long time now. I just hadn't said it out loud until that moment. After that moment on the porch, I didn't leave. Lauren never brought up the idea again either. But everything between us changed for good. We stopped pretending we were just two people sharing a roof because of bad luck. The distance we'd kept with careful words and separate routines disappeared overnight. We started living together the way people do when they've decided the pretending is over. I'd come home from my city shifts and the kitchen light would already be on, knowing she was there. She'd be sitting at the table with legal papers spread out, and I'd change out of my work clothes right on the back porch before stepping inside for dinner. Some nights she oversalted the pasta and I still cleared the plate. Other nights I'd hose down the garden and accidentally soak the hem of her sweater dress, and she'd stand in the yard laughing until tears ran down her cheeks. We argued about me leaving my boots right inside the door and about her reading lawyer emails at 2 in the morning. Then we'd sit at the same kitchen table, eat sliced apples, speak softer, and make peace. The house itself began to soften too. It had always been clean and quiet and orderly. Now it carried laughter in the walls, the smell of my clumsy Sunday pancakes, the low hum of the radio on weekend mornings, 2 mugs always sitting side by side on the counter, my work jacket hanging next to her gray sweaters. Little sentences like, "Don't forget your scarf when you go out," and "Take the headache pills before it gets bad." I hadn't had anything that felt like family since my dad died. Not this kind. Not something built not by blood, but by 2 people slowly choosing each other in the smallest ways. The lawsuit dragged on, but Lauren didn't have to face it alone anymore. I helped her photograph the current property lines, dug through old boxes in the barn for the handwritten boundary notes from Marcus's parents, and had my friend Lucas the plumber scan everything so the lawyer could use it. The lawyer found the hole we needed. Marcus wasn't fighting for family memories. He had quietly partnered with a logistics company that wanted the land for a new warehouse hub. The day of the preliminary hearing, Lauren wore a dark blue blazer, hair pulled back low, just enough lipstick to look like herself. She didn't tremble. I sat in the back row and watched her back stay straight the whole time, thinking I had never seen anyone more beautiful than a woman who no longer needed to borrow coldness to hide her fear. When the judge ruled that the majority of the acreage stayed under Lauren's control pending final judgment, Marcus turned and looked at her with pure disbelief. She met his eyes once, no triumph, no bitterness, just the look of someone who had finally stopped being afraid of him. On the drive home in my old pickup, she sat with her hands folded in her lap. "I thought winning would feel like relief," she said quietly. "It doesn't?" "No." She turned to me. "It feels like grief." "Why?" "Because for 7 years I kept myself locked on this farm, guarding what was mine like a wounded animal protecting its den. I told myself that was surviving. Then you walked in and made everything different." A small smile touched her mouth. "Turns out keeping the land wasn't what made me feel alive. It was having someone come back to this house with me." I had to pull the truck over onto the dirt shoulder, not because of the engine. Because my chest was too full to keep driving without touching her right then. I looked at her. "Lauren." "Yeah?" "I think I'm in love with you." The words came out unplanned. No music, no sunset. Just the wind moving across the empty field, the windshield dusty, and the woman more than 10 years older than me staring at me like she had just heard something too big to answer right away. She asked very softly, "Are you sure that isn't just the feeling of wanting to save someone?" I shook my head. "If it was saving, I would have left weeks ago. I love you because you turned this house into a home. Because you're strong enough that no one should ever have had to let you be that strong alone for so long. Because when you laugh in the kitchen, everything in my head goes quiet. And because—" I took a breath. "Because that first morning when you were feeding the goats on the porch and I asked how long you'd been living here alone, I already knew I couldn't look at you like a stranger anymore." Lauren cried then. Not hard. Just the kind of tears that have been held inside too long and finally found their way out. "You're the first person," she said, voice thick, "who ever made that morning question feel like it wasn't a mistake." "Which question?" "The one you asked me." She smiled through the tears. "Have you been living here alone for a long time?" "No one ever asked me that. They only asked why I didn't sell, why I didn't remarry, why I didn't move somewhere else. No one asked what it cost to be alone that long." I reached over and brushed the tears from her cheek. "Then from now on, can I keep asking?" "Ask what?" "Whether you want me to stay, not just for now. For good." Lauren looked at me for a long time. Then she smiled, tired and bright at the same time. "You still haven't unpacked that soaked backpack from the first night. It's still sitting in the corner of the guest room like some kind of monument. I left it there for historical value. It's ugly as hell, but it has character." She shook her head, then leaned across the seat and kissed me. Our first kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't exactly gentle either. It was the kind of kiss that comes from two people who had lived too long behind their own walls and had finally decided together to take them down. When we pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine. "You know what else I realized the morning after you showed up?" she whispered. "What?" "That if you had left right after that first night, this house would have stayed just a place to exist in, not a place to live. 3 months later, the court settled everything. Lauren kept the land. Marcus dropped all claims after a small settlement on the trust portion. I cut my city cleaning shifts down to 3 days a week and took on more repair jobs around the area. Lauren turned the old barn I had fixed into a small landscape design studio. And the farm, the same place where I had only planned to stay one night, slowly started carrying both of us inside it. My work boots sat beside her brown rubber boots by the door. Grocery lists in both our handwriting stuck to the fridge. The smell of morning coffee mixed with damp earth. 2 toothbrushes in the same ceramic cup. A kitchen drawer that no longer stuck. Evenings on the porch with the radio playing low while neither of us felt the need to speak. If anyone ever asked me when everything really changed, I wouldn't say it was the moment I told her I loved her. I wouldn't say it was the day we won in court. And it wasn't even the kiss in the truck. It was that first morning when the woman who had lived alone for 7 years stood in the gray light, shovel in hand, feeding the goats, and I asked her, "Have you been living here alone for a long time?" Because inside that simple question was something bigger than curiosity. It was recognition. It was real care. It was looking straight at someone's loneliness and choosing not to turn away. And for a woman who had grown used to existing behind walls of silence, maybe that was the thing that changed everything first. I had only planned to stay one night on her farm. But the morning after, when the wall in her eyes finally cracked open, I knew I would never be just a stranger passing through her life again.